Welcome into another episode of the Odds and Audibles podcast. Erik, Skopil, Jared, Mack on this show today. Matt Preem, a little under the weather today. He's going to be off the podcast, probably back next week sometime. But with him not here, we are postponing our mailbag. I know we asked for questions for this week. We wanted to have kind of all hands on deck to get to that and maybe a little more time to collect some other questions, just to have a little more full show. So expect a mailbag probably Monday. I mean, this last week we kind of were expecting to do it on Wednesday, but again, Matt under the weather. We wanted to have everybody on it. So we're doing a different exercise today, which I kind of discovered about a week ago and thought this is like peak off-season podcast content, which is over-unders for Pac-12 football teams. I saw a tweet about a week or so ago of over-unders for all the teams in the conference, and I kind of thought this is just like fun to talk about and probably a good exercise to go through just to kind of get a feel for my head and Jared's head. And initially Matt was going to be a part of it, but he's obviously not available today, but just kind of where our heads are at for the conference as a whole. And so we're going to go ahead and just run through all 12 teams, including Oregon here, using the over-unders that are listed. I'll be honest, Jared, even before we jump into this, I know divisions are like not a thing anymore, but like I couldn't help but feel like the Pac-12 North and the Pac-12 South feel very different this year. Like, I think the Pac-12 North has one dominant-ish team, and then everyone else is kind of muddled together. And the Pac-12 South, I had three pretty dominant teams, and everyone else, I think, pretty much is pretty bad. It kind of stinks, if we're being honest. And so,
would you consider that third team that you have in the South actually dominant, or just a good record?
Just a good record. Yes, just a good record. Yeah, I think we're probably on the same page with
I know who it is.
So
clearly,
I just found it really interesting running through all this, kind of going like, oh, okay. I just think the Pac-12 North teams are going to all end up with about the same conference record, and the Pac-12 South teams are all going to end up with like three good records and three just terrible records. So, anything else?
I was going to say we should probably run through what the over/unders are.
Yeah, that's about where I was to go, unless you had anything to add. All right,
go for it.
This is based upon a tweet I saw on May 25th from Sports Pac-12 Twitter account. USC 9.5, Oregon, UCLA, and Utah all 8.5. Washington 7.5, Arizona State, Cal, Oregon State 5.5. Sorry, Washington. Did I group Washington State in there? They're also 5.5. And then Stanford was 4.5, Colorado 3.5, Arizona 2.5. And this is regular season win-losses, just to be clear. This isn't including a conference championship game or a postseason bowl game. This is just the totality of a regular season. That's how over-unders work. Before we even jump into it, initial thoughts are like, I think these numbers are pretty reasonable once you go through the exercise. I think a couple teams are probably given a little too much respect, and a couple teams the opposite, but like that's probably maybe in part bias that I have towards some of these teams and kind of where I think they are. And obviously Vegas is looking at things from a little different perspective with how they're trying to, garner money off of this and betting interest. But like, I think this is actually pretty fair. Like the teams I have, at least I would say this, like the teams I have grouped in the top tier, like those top four teams are the teams I think are the best four teams in the conference going into the season. And most of the teams in the middle and the bottom are also teams I have kind of in that same range.
Well, I mean, it goes to your point earlier where you're like, there's one Pac-12 North and then like three. There's a huge drop-off between what Washington, what their total is, and then Washington State. It's a two-win margin. It goes from Washington at 7.5, which, we'll get to, and then it's Washington State at 5.5. And then, it's Arizona all the way down at 2.5. So there's clearly a hierarchy here. When I first looked at it, I thought, well, I mean, we'll get into our ultimate predictions, but some of them for plenty of the teams seemed high. Yeah. I just think the Pac-12, unlike other conferences, is a lot of things, but specifically this year, there are a lot of question marks surrounding teams, which hasn't been what's been happening the last couple of years. USC has all of their newcomings, new quarterback, new coach, all of the basically a whole new team through the transfer portal. Oregon has their newcomings as well with a new coach and new offensive coordinator, new quarterback. Washington, you can say the same exact thing about them. UCLA has been pretty solid, but as has Utah. But a lot of other teams in the conference, ASU is a dumpster fire. Arizona, you're not really sure what's going to happen. Washington State, you have no idea with their new quarterback if that'll actually happen. Stanford was terrible last year. Does that happen again? We're not so sure. So I just think that going into this little discussion that we're going to have, there's a lot of question marks here. And I think that was hard for me to just look at first glance and be like, oh, that's too high, or oh, that's too low. It's just like things could happen where these are very accurate, and we could see USC at 10 wins, and then this over under at 9.5 looks right. Or we could see Washington all of a sudden have 5 wins in the season. There's a lot of question marks so it wasn't difficult to get through, but certainly made me think a lot during the exercise.
Yeah, we both mapped out every game. By the way, just was listening. We didn't just be like, oh, this seems low, this seems high. We went through all the games, and I will say just one aside, because I know we're taking 6 minutes to actually get into the exercise, which is probably bad podcasting. I had very few notable non-conference wins for the conference. Overall, I basically have 1 or 2 decent non-conference outcomes, and the rest of it is just loss.
Well, who is the conference playing outside of Utah and Oregon with Georgia and Florida? And then do you want to count Stanford and USC with their Notre Dame traditions? Is that a thing? Because you got UCLA playing all the Alabama teams except for the actual Alabama team. So
right.
There's not a lot of non-conference opponents that you would feel really good about. But yeah, let's jump in.
All right. We'll start with USC. Jared made a good point. Let's start at the top and just go. They were 9.5. I actually go under, but I have them only losing 1 conference game, but going under. I have them losing to Utah. I think Utah is going to be pretty darn good this year. I just have a hard time predicting against them based upon what we saw this last season, how they finished, and even how they competed against Ohio State. And then I have them losing to both Notre Dame and Fresno State. And I think Fresno State's probably the game, Jared. That's kind of the one on the fence I was with. But I thought how well Fresno State performed a year ago against Pac-12 teams. Jake Haener back. Different coaching staff. The head coach there's now at Washington. I don't know. That one to me was the one I was on the fence with. So I think if you're betting this, you're probably basically looking at that game as kind of the one that kind of flips it for you one way or the other. I think Utah, I think Notre Dame, I feel decently confident with those picks. Although I think as we see the season progress, we should know, USC, Utah, it's probably the game maybe of the conference year, I would imagine. And that's kind of smack dab in the middle, October, 15th. So, I mean,
week 7, right?
Yeah, that's right in the middle. So that could really determine the conference, and who knows if USC is at full steam at that point. I expect Utah to be getting close to that and have some momentum based upon its out of conference schedule and kind of what I have predicted there. But I went under with 9 wins for USC.
I went under as well with 9 wins. 9.5 is that's not a lot of margin for error right there if you're USC. I also had them losing to Fresno State, and mostly because of Jake Haener, obviously. I know Kellen DeBoer is in Washington now, but I still think he's an unbelievably talented quarterback we saw it last year, where he could basically save a team by himself and take them down the field. If I'm playing USC next year, I want to play them early before they get chemistry going, before they figure out their defense. I like Alex Grinch as a defensive coordinator for USC. He did a really good job with Oklahoma, where they, basically cut their points allowed pretty significantly, because that was the thing with Oklahoma. They would score 52, but then allow 48. He did better at Oklahoma over the years. I think he'll be fine at USC. But early on in the season, with all of the new faces on defense, with all the new faces on offense, it might not click as it might during week 7 when they play Utah. And that's why I have that Fresno State game as an L for USC and getting them under that 9.5 total. They're still going to be really talented. If they win 10 or 11 games, I won't be surprised. That Utah one is important. That the Notre Dame game being at home is probably important for USC. We'll see what the crowd looks like. But this USC season is a quarterback injury away from being an absolute abomination. And so you can't take that into account when you do any of these over-unders, but that's the one thing when I look at this schedule and it's like, all right, they could certainly make a run here, but a quarterback injury is detrimental to this team.
Yeah, I want to say just before we keep going here, I have 3 teams with 8-1 records, which is probably in the conference, which is probably too many, but
that's a lot.
I just think there's like big separation again. Yeah. Well, we'll get to it. Yeah. Next, we're going to go into Oregon. Those listening, this is probably what you wanted to hear. I've already made this prediction before, and I have not. I'm curious to hear what Jared has to say. I have not changed at all. I think I made these predictions pre-spring in like February. Sticking with it. I think they'll be the over, but by half a game. I have them 9-3. Losses to Georgia, BYU, and Utah. 8-1 in the Pac-12. Undefeated against the division. Which, by the way, I believe if we're still using the same like conference championship determining factors, I think puts Oregon in there as one of the 2 teams. Because again, I have 3 teams at 8-1. Yeah, I actually think Oregon and USC are going to have pretty similar seasons with these new coaching staffs, where there's a couple of hiccups in non-conference play, but once they kind of get going, they're pretty clearly among the best in the conference. And again, I really think it's like 3 teams at the top with a 4th team kind of hanging around, and then everybody else is a little bit down. What'd you have, Jared?
I have the over at 9-3. I have what you had.
Same games, same outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I have losses to Georgia, BYU, and Utah. Okay. It's a really nice schedule. Now that I was able to go through every team's schedule and see like what the haymakers were. Like I forgot who it was, but I think it's Arizona State who has like at USC, at Utah, at Washington, and like at Oregon. It's like, oh shoot, that's terrible. But for Oregon, it's a good schedule. I do worry a little bit about that first Pac-12 conference game at Washington State because that can get a little noisy up there. But at Arizona, at Cal, at Colorado, at Oregon State, and Oregon State's not really even an away game. That's pretty nice. Oregon has done a really good job the last couple seasons of defending Autzen Stadium. So you have Stanford, UCLA, UW, Utah, BYU, and Eastern Washington. It's pretty good. I think 9-3 is it. I could see them beating BYU, but I could see them in turn losing a conference game. I think 9-3 is probably their ceiling, which is absolutely commendable and respectable. And an 8-1 conference record is what Oregon has been accustomed to seeing the last couple of years. Nobody can go 9-0 because a 9-game conference season is ridiculous. So, George, if you're listening, I got 9-3 as a max. I don't know if they'll go to 10-2. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah, one other thing is I have 2 home losses, and Oregon hasn't lost a home game since Stanford in 2018. So,
I have 2 home losses as well.
Kind of an interesting thing I noticed just kind of going through this of like, I have them losing to 2 teams from the state of Utah at home, and Oregon hasn't lost at home in like 4 years. So we'll see. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic there, and maybe I'm being too optimistic on some of these road games because, like you said, I think Washington State on the road is a little scary.
That was the one I had a little hesitancy towards.
Yeah. All right. Moving down the list to UCLA at 8-5. This is probably surprising. I didn't expect to take the over here, but then I looked at the schedule, and they have 3 layup non-conference games against Bowling Green, Alabama State, and Southern Alabama.
Yeah.
So like they're going to go 3-0 there, and then you look at the rest of their schedule, and I think it's kind of favorable. And again, I might be discounting how competitive.
It's not bad.
Some of the middle of this conference is, but I actually have them winning 10 games.
10?
Well, I felt okay. So, and we're going to get to Utah in a moment here. I realized looking through Utah, I was like, am I going to have them going undefeated in Pac-12 play? And I was like, I don't think they're that good. I don't think they're like that level. But that was kind of where my head was starting to run towards. Because if you look at it, I obviously have Utah beating Oregon and USC. We've already established that. Mm-hmm. And so otherwise, they're going to run to the conference unless you think Arizona State, Washington State, Arizona, Stanford, or Colorado are going to win. So I have UCLA losing to Oregon and losing to USC in their rivalry game. and then winning their other 7 conference games, including against Utah, which is maybe optimistic, possibly. But like, I think even last year's game with UCLA was like UCLA and Utah was not a blowout game, I don't think, and I think part of it was because of quarterback injury. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being too optimistic there. Either way, I think they'll hit the over, and I think it's mostly schedule related. Like, I'm not saying they're bad. They also had an incredible offseason from the transfer portal, as did USC.
100%.
Both of those programs brought in like some of the best transfers in the country, and UCLA really loaded up on both sides of the football. So credit to Chip Kelly for taking advantage of that. But I think they're going to win 10 games, or I have them winning 10 games, and I think it could also be a deal where they win 9 games. But either way, I think 8.5 feels like you take the over.
I have them at over 8.5 as well, but I have them at 9 wins with 3 losses: Utah, Oregon, and USC in their rivalry game. But like you said, you start going through every game, and all of a sudden they're 5-0 because they face Bowling Green, Alabama State, and Southern Alabama in the first 3 games. So that's 3-0 right there, just like what you mentioned. At Colorado, that could be something, but we'll get to Colorado later. Same thing with Arizona State. I don't know how they'll be good at all. Then the Utah Oregon back-to-back is tough. Those are probably, to me, they felt like 2 losses. I like this UCLA team. They showed a lot of fight last year. They got Dorian Thompson-Robinson back. Chip Kelly's still there. New contract, all that good stuff. Getting off to like a 5-0 start would help. Like you mentioned, Erik, they had a tremendous transfer portal season. New defensive coordinator. Maybe that'll help them from allowing X number of yards per game. That was just terrible. It's just, yeah, like you were saying, it's hard not to go over here. Because unless you think they're going to lose to that Stanford, ASU, Arizona crowd or Cal to end the season, I don't. I think they're going to lose to the good teams, which happened last year. Other than that, they don't really play anybody who's good.
All right, to Utah at 8-5 as well. I also have the over here. I have a clean sweep with all these 8-5s being over.
Same.
And I think Utah, like, honestly feels like it should be a little higher, and maybe I'm showing a level of bias. It's worth noting they play USC and UCLA back-to-back in October. That could be a really tough stretch. They open at Florida, and I have them beating Florida on the road, which is maybe a stretch. It was like literally the only non-conference marquee game I had the Pac-12 winning. I just wanted to give somebody some credit. So I have them at 11 wins, and I don't know if that sits great with me because, again, I don't know. This is like, I have a lot of respect for Utah because of how they played Oregon last year and the way they honestly just embarrassed Oregon twice in like a 3-week span. Like, that was extremely impressive. And Oregon, I know, had their own faults and issues with injuries and with all the coaching stuff with Cristobal, but I still kind of buy that they were the better team. And I think anybody who doesn't is kind of misleading themselves. So I think they're going to win the conference. I think they're the best team in the conference going in. I think most people feel that way. And if you look at their schedule, aside from those 2 LA games in October and then the Oregon game in November, it's not a lot of potential pitfalls to me. And again, maybe this is me speaking just to the way I see the conference, but I don't see like there being the middle being very strong or the bottom being very strong this year. I really think it's like 3 or 4 pretty good teams. I think UCLA is kind of that quasi good team. And then everybody, I think the top teams will beat the rest of the teams in the conference is how I've got it going. And we'll see, but I have Utah covering and covering pretty clearly.
Yeah, I have the exact same thing. 11-1, wins over Florida, losses to USC. Yeah, they're just going to beat up on everybody. The Pac-12 South is not very good. That Oregon game at the second to last week of the season, that could be a loss. That could easily be a win. I think that's obviously one that we'll all, probably including those listening, will circle on our calendars for a game to watch. But, you look at it, it's Florida to open, and Southern Utah, then San Diego State, ASU, Oregon State, UCLA. That's not a terrible way to open your season. Florida, on the other hand, is going through a coaching change. They're going through a quarterback change with Emory Jones now at Arizona State, which we'll get to later. Anthony Richardson was there last year. I get it. I know. But that's not the Florida team that we've seen the last couple of years. That could be an easy win for Utah. But yeah, I'm still operating under the fact that they have Cam Rising still. They still have basically everybody from last year except for Keithy. No, Keithy's still there. I think it's a stacked team. It's probably the best team in the Pac-12. And the way, like Erik, like you were just mentioning, the way they handled Oregon twice. And you were there for both games. I was there for the game at Utah. When you see that in person, not just through your television screen where you can flip the channel, where you have to watch it every single play, that was eye-opening for how the fact that despite Oregon with all their injuries and stuff, that's a very talented squad, and Utah just didn't care. They just ran right through them. So I feel like they're going to have that. They had a taste of it. They got to the Rose Bowl last year. They ended up losing to Ohio State. They're going to have that taste again in their mouths this year, and I feel like an 11-1 record is not far-fetched at all.
I don't want to be totally dismissive of that Oregon game because it's at home, and again, Oregon historically has been really good at home. I just feel like it would feel weird for me to pick against Utah in that game, in part because we were I think I picked against Utah at least one of the two games. I think the first game
you did twice. I hate to say it.
Did we go twice? Okay, I can't remember.
I didn't.
If I course correct, I thought I picked like a close Utah win the second time, but either way, I know I was short-sighted on my Utah picks both times last year, and so I'm trying to course correct a little bit here. I know the teams are obviously a little different. We'll see. That's the end of the season game. Maybe the year plays out differently, but I look at that game and being I know Oregon fans are listening, probably going like, no, it'll be the revenge game. It's at home. It'll turn it around. It's very possible. I don't want to say it's not gonna. It could happen.
Maybe.
I just think for me to pick right now in early June without seeing Oregon win a bunch of games and seeing how Utah looks, I just feel more comfortable picking Utah to win that game. All right. We now move on to kind of the mediocrity of the conference here with Washington at 7-5. And I thought 7-5 was really optimistic. They won 4 games last year, new coaching staff. They lost a lot of talent. I went under here. I have them bowl eligible at 6-6. I have them losing to Michigan State, UCLA, Arizona State, which is probably questionable.
Arizona State, interesting.
Oregon State, Oregon, and Washington State. Well, I had to give Arizona State a win, and so there it is.
That's fair. That's fair.
So they've got some layups, I think, quote unquote, to start with: Kent State and Portland State, Stanford, Arizona, Cal, Colorado. Like it's kind of you'd be really hard pressed. Go ahead.
Quick diversion from the UW talk. Are you higher on Arizona or Arizona State? I can't tell.
I have Arizona State with more wins in the overall, but Arizona with more conference wins. Well, Arizona's non-conference is tough, dude. It's San Diego State, it's Michigan State, and it's North Dakota State or Mississippi State. Sorry, is the middle game. Whereas Arizona State has Northern Arizona and Eastern Michigan in non-conference. So I'm giving them those 2 games, and then I have the head-to-head. I have Arizona winning. We just ruined our Arizona.
Yeah, it's just like dang.
We can fly past that. So I don't know. I have Washington on the under here. Maybe I'm being a little bit homer as an Oregon beat writer here, having Washington losing to Arizona State. Maybe it should be 7. Either way, I don't think the over hits.
I don't think the over hits. I have them at under, but I have them at 7 wins. I have losses to Michigan State, UCLA, Oregon State, Oregon, and Washington State for the Apple Cup. I have them beating Arizona State. That's the difference here.
Sure.
This is a team where I have a lot of question marks. Is it going to be Michael Penix? Is he going to be the answer at quarterback? Is it going to be Morris? Is it going to be Heward? Like, I don't know who it's going to be. And I guess it was a similar situation with Oregon going into spring camp, but it seems like they've kind of solidified that with Bo Nix. A lot of the offensive line returns for Washington, which is a good thing for them. I think it's Jackson Kirkland who's their left tackle or their right tackle. They have a pretty favorable schedule. So I could potentially seeing it hit the over. I'd be really surprised though, because I just don't with who they've lost in the transfer portal and who they haven't brought in any of their recruiting classes the last couple of years, I have a hard time thinking that every single one of those 3-star prospects, the way some people like to think, are going to rise up and become actual starters and real contributors onto the team. But the soft schedule is helpful because they don't play Utah or USC. And not playing those and subbing Arizona and Arizona State or Colorado from the Pac-12 South, that's pretty nice if you're a Washington fan. Michigan State, that's a loss. So there goes the Pac-12's non-conference schedule.
The other thing with Washington, you broke down the offense. I think defensively, they were so good against the pass. I don't know if they finished, but at one point they were like first nationally. They lost their 2 all-conference corners to the draft, and I think that's going to force them to take a little bit of a step back. They won't be quite as dominant in that part of the game. So we'll see. I mean, again, this is another new coach that most of the teams, not most, but several of the teams we talked about so far have new coaching staffs, and we could be totally wrong. And DeBoer might come in and they might be much better than expected, and they might win. I also just think expecting him to win 4 more games in his first season with, as you said, all the changes on the roster just feels like a little optimistic. All right, here's another one I think is an optimistic line. That's Arizona State at 5.5. Kind of, again, a little surprised that they're kind of considered on the verge of being bowl eligible. I mean, this program lost everything. I mean, and it's kind of amazing that this is not a program. We talked about new coaches, that Herm Edwards still has his job, considering.
I have no idea how that happened. I had no clue.
It's similar to like Sean Miller at Arizona being just hanging around for a couple of years, even though there was like pretty clearly some not too great stuff going on. I have Arizona State with the under. I have them 3 wins, 2 of them out of conference, and the other to Washington. And I'll be honest, the Washington thing, the more I look at it, I kind of feel weird about, but I felt like I needed to give them a conference win, and they have a tough conference. They have a tough conference schedule, man. Like, I think Arizona's better than Arizona State. So I have that. That's the other one. And then maybe Colorado, you can throw their direction. But other than that, they're not beating.
But it's at Colorado.
Exactly, right?
That's the problem.
Other than that, it's Utah, it's SC, Stanford maybe, UCLA, Washington State, Oregon State. Like, I don't know which games you feel good about. So I have them at 3 wins and taking the under.
I have them at 3 wins as well, under 5.5. I don't know how they got 5.5. It just seems ridiculous. Wins at Northern Arizona, Eastern Michigan, and Arizona. So I just think that's a toss-up, man. I like Arizona this year. We'll get to my picks in a few. But that one, I don't know. I think it could go either way. It's one of those rivalry games. It's kind of like Cal and Stanford some years where it doesn't make any sense if Cal or Stanford wins, but they do. Couple questions. How good is Emory Jones? Because I've watched him a lot at Florida, and I've wondered that every single time. So what's he going to do at Arizona State? They lost 16 kids to the transfer portal this season. And obviously they brought back some talent, some Auburn, like an Auburn guy, a Miami guy. Does that matter? It's my second question. My third question. This NCAA cloud that is overhanging Tempe, Arizona, how long is this going to last? And number 4, my final question, when does Herm Edwards get fired? Because I have an 8-game losing streak for Arizona State here. This is tough. From Utah to Oregon State, weeks 4 through 11. I don't really see an obvious win. Erik just kind of went through. Maybe at Colorado, but it's in Colorado. This is a tough schedule for them, and this is about what I don't see how they come close to hitting the over.
The only thing I can think is that there's like a sense of the whole scandal thing actually brings everybody together. You know how like sometimes the I'm trying to create a narrative that makes any sense. I don't think it's even reasonable, but like that the players come together and they fight for their coach and they want to. But like I also think that's ridiculous, and I'm with you where it probably becomes like a situation of even if Arizona State doesn't want to like admit culpability for the Herm Edwards thing, where it just becomes easier for both parties to move on, because I don't expect this is a good year for Arizona State, regardless of, as we've said, I think they're going to win like 3 games. All right, Cal at 5-5. another one where I think it's pretty reasonable. I have it really close, but I have the under. I have Cal at 5 wins. Could this be the first one we disagree on, Jared? Because I think we've agreed every time so far.
You had what?
I have 5 wins. I have the under at 5 for Cal.
I have the under 4.
Oh, okay. So you're even less optimistic. All right. My wins are UC Davis, UNLV. Those are
The
2
UC Davis one. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one.
I have them beating Arizona, Stanford, and Colorado. I paused a little bit on the rivalry game with Stanford. I could see that being a loss. I'm really conflicted on Stanford. I don't know, man, because last year they beat Oregon. I've been on the Tanner McKee is good train for a while,
forever,
but yet they just completely crapped the bed following that win. They didn't win a game the whole rest of the season, so I have a little hard time being too optimistic. And Cal is usually a little bit more frisky, if you will. So I had them at 5 wins. Either way, I just think it's hard to pick an over again.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I got them at 4 wins with wins over UC Davis, UNLV, Colorado, and Stanford.
So you have Arizona. You have them Arizona beating them.
Yeah, I have Arizona beating them. I did put a question mark next to that one and against Colorado because I don't know how those games are going to go right now. If you can tell me aliens came out of the sky and beat those 2 teams, I'd say sure, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, I mean this is a tough schedule for Cal, big time, especially in a year where Jack Plummer is their quarterback. Only 32% of their offense is returning, 48% is returning on defense. They're losing a lot, and they have a pretty good gauntlet here. They have at Notre Dame, then you have Arizona, whatever. But I feel like that's still going to be a competitive game for the 4th game of the season. At Washington State, at Colorado, which is always difficult with the altitude, and then Washington, Oregon, USC, Oregon State, rivalry game, Stanford. That's tough. That's a hard schedule right there. And I think they'll be lucky to get 2 wins out of that. Really lucky to get 2 wins out of that. I just 1 win is probably where they're going to be in that.
They close with UCLA as well. So
yeah,
it's like that back end. There could be a lot of losses. Like they could be 3-3, 3-2 maybe, and then just slip and lose a crap load of games. Is kind of how I see that potentially going.
Yeah, I have them going 2-6 over their final 8 games, and I think it could be optimistic. That's a win over Stanford and a win at Colorado. Like that could easily be 0-8.
Yeah, it's a weird the Pac-12 North, and again, I keep using the little fingers here for those that listen to that podcast because it's I know that's kind of not a totally a thing anymore because they're not including it. I just think it's just going to be a lot of mediocrity outside of Oregon. Is how I have it going. The next team, though, I have finishing 2nd in the division, if that matters to you, and that's Oregon State, which is also at 5.5. I actually feel decent about this one. Now, the first game here with Boise State is probably the one that potentially flips it to being 7 or 6 wins. I'm going to be optimistic and pick an Oregon State win. Just going to do it. It's a home game. I think they got a decent amount of continuity back. I know there's some transfer departures. They didn't use the portal, by the way, at all. They only added 1, which was, I think, Stanford.
Strange.
Stanford and Oregon State were the only ones to use this few in the conference. Everybody else used upwards of 10, but usually between 5 and 8. I think UCLA used 12. USC might have used more. I didn't look at their total because Oregon didn't play them. But Oregon State, I have winning against Boise State, losing to Fresno State, beating Montana, beating Washington State, beating Colorado, beating Washington, beating Cal, beating Arizona State to go 7-5 and finish with a 5-4 record, which actually makes them, from my point of view, my predictions, the 5th best team in the conference in conference games. And I don't, and this kind of, maybe this was a little bit of bias going in. Remember a couple weeks ago, I forget when it was, we had a mailbag podcast talking about who could maybe move up from the bottom towards the top to be kind of a competitive team. And I picked Oregon State as the team from the north and UCLA from the south. Yep. I still, maybe it was just that was kind of what I expected would happen, so I made it happen. But I think Oregon State might be the second best team in the division this year.
I've got Oregon State in the over. I have them at 12-0. No, I'm kidding.
Whoa!
7-5. I have wins over Boise State, Montana State, Stanford, Wazoo, Colorado, Washington, and Cal. Yeah, I've been losing to Fresno State, USC, Utah, Arizona State, and Oregon.
Okay.
I think
we're so lockstep. It's kind of annoying. Like I kind of want to just pick like Colorado to win 8 games now.
Well, I mean, I think this line is crazy. 5.5.
I agree.
I mean, I don't remember how many games Oregon State won at home last year, but it was like 5 or 6. They were undefeated. That would hit the over by itself. I think they have a pretty favorable schedule. Facing USC early, I contemplated it. I really thought about it. 4th game of the season. I just think USC's talent is too much, and it's going to be in Southern California, so that might help USC. I don't know. The USC Utah, that's going to be tough. That's those 2 losses right there, 100%. But that's when I feel like people are going to see that they lost 2 in a row and say, Oregon State, they've lost 3 of their first 5 games. They're nothing. And then they have cupcake after cupcake in Stanford, Washington State, Colorado, and then an actual not a cupcake in Washington, but then a cupcake in Cal. That's pretty good. So that could be an easy 5-game winning streak right there. So I like Oregon State this year. Not 12-0 enough, but I think they got some potential here to make a little bit of a run.
I think I just like Jonathan Smith as a solidifying force that's like they're going to be bowl eligible or close every year. Maybe every 5 years they're a little better and are actually, 8 or 9 wins maybe. But like I know they haven't gotten there quite yet. But I think that's sneakily been one of the best hires the conference has had the last 4 or 5 years, to be honest with you. And I know Oregon fans probably want to dismiss that, but I think if you just like kind of look hard at it and think about it, it's been a pretty successful hire. And like every year it feels like they kind of maximize the wins. Like I know 2020 wasn't a fantastic season, but they beat Oregon that year. And even last year's game, and Oregon again was coming off that Utah thing, tons of injury excuses if you want to use it. That was like a pretty competitive game at parts.
It shouldn't have been.
Shouldn't have been. It
was.
You sweated it a little bit. So I just don't think you can overlook that game. And frankly, like it could be a thing where that game in Corvallis right around Thanksgiving is really competitive, and for Oregon that might be the game aside from Utah and those are back to back. I think that you kind of have to sweat a little bit. So, but yeah, I think this is an easy over for me. All right, wrapping it up here, the last group, Washington State also at 5-5. This was probably one of the tougher ones for me because I think that line's pretty fair. I am taking the over, but just slightly. I have them winning 6 games, 2 non-conference games over Idaho and Colorado State, Cal, Arizona State, Arizona, and then again I have them winning the rivalry game, the Apple Cup against Washington. They play Wisconsin on the road early. That's going to be a loss. They play Oregon, USC, Oregon State, Utah. I have them losing all of those pretty decisively, and then Stanford, I have them losing, but you could convince me that's going to be a win. So I have 6.
I have the over as well at 6. I have wins against Idaho, Colorado State, Cal, Stanford, Arizona State, and Washington.
So you have Arizona beating them.
I have Arizona beating them.
God, you've got some. I'm so interested in your Arizona picks because that's coming up later. All right.
I gotta look these over again and see what it is. Yeah, Washington State's another really interesting one. They don't have a new coach coming in, but it feels like they kind of have a new coach coming in.
And it is. He only coached half the season.
Right. And Cam Ward, what's he going to be? He was this big-time transfer commit, one of the highest that Washington State has ever gotten out of Incarnate World, right? No, Incarnate Word.
Word, no L.
Word. Yeah, I always get confused with that. How is that going to translate? It's just going to be another interesting team to kind of go and watch. They have a hard schedule, certainly. I mean, this stretch of at USC, at Oregon State, hosting Utah is tough. Wouldn't really like that. And since when were they playing Wisconsin, the second game of the season?
Why? Like,
when did this happen? I was writing it down. I looked at it. And I was
Yep.
just so confused. Like, why isn't this being like a bigger deal? Like, this is a Pac-12 team against one of the better Big Ten teams. Shouldn't the Pac-12 say, "Hey guys, watch this game"?
that would be one where if somehow Washington State wins, that would give the conference a little bit more respect. And I don't think it happens. But like if Cameron Ward,
not at all.
let's say Cameron Ward is really great and he just goes up and is explosive and carves up that Badger defense and they win that game, suddenly the conference is going to have a little bit more respect. I just don't see it happening for a variety of reasons. I just expect Wisconsin to just kind of line up and just move the ball down the field and do kind of what they always do, which is just use their 320-pound offensive linemen to move the smaller Washington State defensive line around. All right.
That's the problem with Washington State. Like, none of their offensive linemen is returning. That's why I'm skeptical, but continue.
I was just going to jump on, unless you had anything else, Cougar talk. I was going to move on to the last couple here.
I'm good.
Stanford, 4.5. Another close one here. They play a really tough non-conference schedule. I know they do this every year, so I shouldn't be.
It's terrible, man. It's
surprised,
so hard.
but it's like, do yourself a favor and don't play all the good teams, because I actually think if they played UCLA's non-conference schedule, they win like 7 games. I have them winning 4. I have them going 4-5 in Pac-12 play, but 4-8 overall. And that's just their schedule is really tough. Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't their schedule the hardest in the? Sorry, I have them beating Colgate to start the season, to be clear. But isn't their schedule the toughest in the conference according to the FPI? I know you wrote a story about that a couple of days ago.
Yeah, they're the hardest in the conference. They're 2 or 3 spots ahead of Oregon. You can see why, and going through this.
I'm going to run through it just in order here. Colgate, USC, Washington, Oregon State, Notre Dame. Finally, a bit of a breather with Arizona State. UCLA, Washington State, Utah, at Cal, and then finished with BYU. I mean, that's just really making it up on yourself. And for a team that has just been kind of in a rut, I just have a hard time
also
expecting more wins. And by the way, did I do that right? Yeah, I know I have them 4-8. So yeah, I Colgate, Oregon State, Arizona State, and Washington State. The Oregon State one, I'm not sure on. I just figure at some point they have to win one of these games, or else they will be terrible. So I have them on the under.
Colgate's nothing to mess around with. I hope you know. They were good last year.
I don't know.
They were. I was doing some research on this. They were a top 25 passing defense team last year, and as an FCS squad. So that's not a push it's not a cupcake game. But ultimately, I have them under 4.5. I'm at 4 wins, and I don't know who I would pick for their 5th win. I have them, beating Colgate, beating Washington, beating Arizona State, and beating Washington State.
I actually have them losing to Washington, but beating Oregon State. Interesting.
I got them losing to Oregon State. I have them losses to USC, but I think I checked the line on that game. USC is like plus 11.5 or minus 11.5 right now. Second game of the year. Stanford at home might be a cover. Losses to Oregon, Oregon State, Notre Dame, UCLA, Utah, Cal, and BYU. And I don't know what game I'd really want to overturn there.
Cal,
maybe the Cal game, yeah, but I don't know.
I feel like they're going to be a team where you're just like, they're probably better than their record, but their schedule stinks. Like, it's just so hard, and it's
tough
for themselves.
They're going to be talented, though. They get McKee back. They return. It was 91% of their offense from last year. All their offensive linemen is back, and I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. But the schedule is brutal. I mean, Notre Dame sandwiched in there after Oregon and Oregon State, and then finishing it with BYU after your rivalry game. It feels like Cal's schedule with UCLA finishing it off. It's just not what you want to see.
Stanford does not schedule. I guess I would have said Colgate was a cupcake, but you've told me they aren't. So I was gonna say Stanford does not schedule cupcakes. powerhouse.
they're for an FCS school, they're not a cupcake.
All right. Colorado 3.5. I don't know, man. I feel like I'm optimistic here.
I think you are.
I have them beating TCU at home, which is just a lot. But like I go back to like they've usually been decent in non-conference and just fallen apart. So like I don't know. I don't have them covering. I have them under at 3 wins over TCU,
even wow,
and Arizona State.
Do
you have them over? Do you have them winning any games?
Yeah, no, I had them winning games, but I had them at the under here.
The last 3.5. I had them at 3.
What do I got here? I got them at 2 wins.
It's okay.
Yeah,
you don't have beating the Horned Frogs.
No, I have them losing their first 5 games of the season.
So you have them losing the Air Force as well.
I have them losing the Air Force and Minnesota.
Minnesota was easy for me. I don't know. I was trying to be optimistic.
TCU's not bad.
They won 5 games last year, so I was trying to find a way to make it.
But it's Colorado, man. I don't know.
I mean, Colorado win last year. Didn't they win 4, 3? I don't know. What did they do? What happened?
The Air Force is going to be a tricky one because I don't know what it is, but FBS schools just can't handle like those, like the military teams, basically. And I don't know why I don't know why I would think Colorado's going to beat this over. I just like their schedule's difficult. Their team, we watched them in person last year. I know that was much too close of a game for Oregon standards, but you could just tell that you watched them play against their non-conference opponents last year. Like it's a struggling team.
Texas A&M though, it was close last year. They lost by 3. It was a good game.
A&M had all their quarterbacks were dead. This is the team I was talking about earlier where I misjudged it for Arizona State. Colorado's final 4 games look like hell. Oregon, USC, Washington, Utah.
It's tough.
That's tough. And then sandwiched between there is ASU ahead of Oregon and then Oregon State. No thanks. Doesn't look good. So, yeah, I got them under 3.5.
Arizona finishing it up 2.5. I went under. I think we've already established this. I had them beating Colorado and Arizona State and losing to everybody else. I think they're going to go 0-3 in the non-conference. I mean, I think San Diego State proved last year to be really pretty darn good. Mississippi State is an SEC team. I just don't see them winning that game. That'd be interesting to see some Mike Leach against Pac-12 competition again, I guess. And then North Dakota State, I know it's FCS, but that's every year one of the better FCS teams. So 2 wins under. And again, this is a trend for me. Was once you get out of that top group, I had a lot of overs. It's a lot of unders for me once you get from, honestly, like what did I have? I have over for Oregon State and over for Washington State. Everything else is an under after you get from that top 4.
I have the over here.
Oh,
yeah.
How'd you
get the over? I'm a big Arizona believer this year.
I kind of like them too. It's just
I'm trying to make sure my math is correct.
You have winning 6 games.
What I put down. I have them winning a bunch.
I picked up on that when you were running through other games.
I got them winning. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. I got them winning 6 games this year.
Full eligibility for the Wildcats.
I have full eligibility. And Jed Fish, we trust, Patriot legend. I have them beating San Diego State and North Dakota State.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's optimistic, I think.
Probably. I think 6 wins is clearly optimistic.
Well, I want to say before you keep going, I just like that we're ending with a little bit of a difference in picks because I think this is the first time we've disagreed the entire podcast on the over/under. The entire time.
I have them now beating Cal and Colorado, so they're on a little 3-game winning streak with losses to exactly after Oregon, Washington, USC, Utah. Yuck, that's a terrible stretch, and then UCLA. And wins over Washington State and Arizona State to end the season.
I don't know. I like that we have different of opinion for once because it was all pretty similar looks at this. I think to wrap it up, I know we talked about this a little before. I don't know if I totally understand how the Pac-12 conference tiebreaker is going to work here because I have USC, Utah, and Oregon all at 8-1. And Jared, you were like, we're not even doing that, but I kind of wanted to just wrap it up some way and say, I think if I understand the tiebreaker correctly, I think it would be Oregon against Utah in this because, Oregon against USC in this because USC would have the head-to-head in my prediction here at least. But no, I had USC beating Utah beating USC. Sorry, I'm all lost here. I had some written down wrong. So no, I would have Utah and Oregon as a rematch. Is how I have it constructed in the conference championship game.
I think I would have it the same.
I have 7 teams bowl eligible: Oregon, Oregon State, Washington State, USC, Utah, and UCLA. I think you have one more because you toss Arizona in there, which I kind of love that was your pick.
Yeah, I just the Jetfish, the Jaden DeLaura. I think they're revamped. Don Brown isn't there, who's a terrible defensive coordinator. However, he is the head coach at the University of Massachusetts, so we love Don Brown. I just think I think it's a relatively favorable start to the season for them. I know San Diego State and North Dakota State are difficult FCS opponents, but you know, I'm putting my trust in Jetfish. I think they hit the over no matter what. 6 wins is probably way too much, but I think an over of you just need 3 wins. I think Jed can do that for you.
San Diego State's not FCS, just to clarify.
Oh, not FCS. Sorry, they are
Mountain West.
Mountain West.
Mountain West. The thing I was just going to note is I think I have the Pac-12 going again like 1-5 against the Mountain West and BYU schools. Like BYU, I kind of include there though, even though they're not. Not great. I think it'll be an interesting season. I thought this was kind of a fun discussion to kind of lay some groundwork of where we're at. I think we'll turn this into some written content probably next week of my picks, your picks, and kind of run through it all. So that's on the site as well. Any parting thoughts, Jared?
No. Just go Arizona.
Go Wildcats.
Go Cats. Yeah, Jetfish we trust.
Podcast. All right. For Erik Skopil and Jared Mack, thank you for listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast. Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.